Hi everybody around the world, and thank you for joining our fourth webinar of our webinar series Hoppy Topics. Today we talk about our new and very interesting dry hopping device. My name is Sandro Gekulza and I'm working for the technical support at HopSteiner Germany. For everybody who's joining for the first time, I'd like to give a very short introduction. Our webinar series is a free online seminar with presentations about various hop-related topics. As we are still facing some limitations of traveling and meeting each other, we have decided to additionally offer this kind of online support. In this way, we want to keep you up to date about the latest research in hops. Before I introduce our speaker of today's presentation, everybody should know that questions and comments are absolutely welcome. You can address them through the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen anytime during the seminar. I'll pick them up in the end of the session where we have time for discussions. The presentation itself will take about 35 to 40 minutes, followed by the Q&A session. So in total, we have about 1 hour. Here with us today, we have Willi Mitter, our former technical director at HopSteiner. Willi studied at the University of Weihenstephan and finished 1979 as an engineer in brewing science and beverage technology. After being technical assistant at the university, he joined HopSteiner as the manager of the extraction plant in the city of Laupheim. 8 years later, the company moved to Mainburg and Willi became the supervisor of Steiner's production facilities in Germany. From 1994 to 2019, he was the technical director of Steiner's technology department in Mainburg, including processing, R&D, and technical support to breweries and brewing groups around the globe. Last year, Willi retired, but we are very happy that he's still in charge with some ongoing activities in our technical team, such as the project about the previously called beer cleaner, the device that we are talking today. Years ago, Willi brought up this idea of this new dry hopping device, and together with BrauKon Process Solutions, it became commercially available and was introduced during the Braubeviale 2018. Willi, we are curious about the latest developments and some more insights of this new HopSteiner dry hopping device, and I give the words to you now.
Thank you, Sandro, for the kind introduction. And to all participants, welcome to the HopSteiner webinar, Hoppy Topics. So as Sandro already mentioned, I'm already working for 40 years with HopSteiner. And I remember when I began my career, I started as a plant manager in the extraction plant where we still worked with methylene chloride. And this is unbelievable. Nobody can imagine such a solvent for the hop extraction nowadays. So in the last 40 years, a lot of things changed. And I think also nowadays we have much more questions about hops and application of hops in brewing than we had 40 years ago, where people were mainly interested just in alpha and isoalpha acids. So there's a much wider range now. And I hope to be able to at least answer one of these questions, and that's how to reduce beer losses when you do dry hopping. So when you put pellets in the cold beer, even in a static system, they dissolve rather fast. So within 1 hour or 1.5 hours, they dissolve in the beer. But there are also a lot of changes with the pellets because the volume of the pellets increases tremendously. There's a swelling of hop pellets and the volume increases 6 times. So that means they absorb a lot of beer, and also the weight of the hops together with the beer will increase up to 12 times. And therefore, due to this absorption of beer, we have, of course, a lot of beer losses when we do dry hopping, and that can mean up to 30% or sometimes even more. This strongly depends on the quantity which is used for dry hopping. Yeah, what are the options to remove the hop trub? And there is one option to do a sedimentation in the tank. You wait for several days till the hops settle, and then you do a separation. And of course, with this method, you have a lot of losses, a lot of beer losses, because when you open the valve at the bottom of the tank, you cannot stop immediately when no more hops are coming. It's always hops plus beer, so you lose at the same time a lot of beer. And on the other hand, it's a manual process, so the handling is also very difficult. And yeah, sometimes the hop trap's stuck in the valve, and it's not such an easy thing. And I think you have to avoid something like that. You have to avoid some surprises like we had here by opening the valve and nothing was coming. Then we opened it even more and more, and all of a sudden all the hop trap came out of the beer, and that's why we look like that. But I think I can later show you possibilities to avoid such a mess. By the way, this was in the brewery of my son-in-law where we did dry hopping. Okay, other methods to remove the hop trap. And of course, a lot of breweries, they use a centrifuge. But also with a centrifuge, it's very risky to use it for a dry hop beer, because there's a high risk of blocking the centrifuge. So even if you use a centrifuge, you should try to remove as much of the hop trap before you go to the centrifuge. And it can even cause a damage. There can be transmission failures or whatever. And of course, if you have more particles in the beer, the performance is much worse than usual. And even if you don't have a damage of the centrifuge, at least the cleaning, of course, is very difficult when it blocks. You have to take apart the whole centrifuge, and this takes a lot of time and is a lot of work, of course. So I think it's not the ideal way just to work with a centrifuge, but more to this subject later. There is also the possibility of filtration, but that's the same thing. So a filter, whether it's a horizontal filter or a candle filter, they will also block soon. Of course, you can add more Kieselguhr, but depending on the quantity you use for dry hopping, I think a limit of 300 grams, or over that limit of 300 grams, you shouldn't use this filtration device. And it's again the same thing here. The performance will be strongly reduced and you will have high beer losses. So therefore, we have another idea, and as I think a much better solution, and that's the so-called BrauKon HopSteiner. So my initial name for this device was a beer cleaner, because we developed it to remove hop trap from the beer, from the dry hopped beer. So it's a HopSteiner invention. I would say it's not a big thing, because we bought such a sieve already in our extraction plant about 35, 36 years ago. And at this time, the background was to remove hop solids from the solvent before we go into the evaporation plant, because this plant material gave a worse, there was a layer of these solids in the tubes of the evaporator, and we needed much more heat. That means much more energy. And after we installed such a sieve, it worked much better. And I thought if this worked for a solvent with hop particles, this should also work for beer, for dry hop beer. And 5, 6 years ago, we started with very simple tests, just in a small scale. And we saw that we can easily separate hop solids from the beer. But of course, it took us several years to get more experience. We had to change this device completely. It's a different thing, which is nowadays used also for wastewater treatment, for example. So it's completely different. But I think now we reached a stage where we can easily use it in breweries to remove the hop trap. And so I'm happy that BrauKon took the license, and with the help of Bunky process solutions and BrauKon, we got now a nice design and a device which really works efficiently. So that's the way it looks like. So there is, the left picture shows you how you can ship it. It's a very low height and easy to ship it. And on the right side, you see the sieve erected in the form how you process it. So that's easy to handle. It is on rolls. So even within the brewery, you can take it from one place to another. Now, how does it work? There's a small chamber up here, and in this chamber we pump the beer. And from here there's an overflow of beer plus hop particles down the sieve, and the beer immediately disappears through these slits, which have 250 micron. So the beer disappears here, is collected in this chamber, and the hop particles slowly move down, and during moving down they still drop beer into this tank. And finally we collect the hop trub in this part, in the lower part of the HopSteiner, and there from time to time we have to discharge the spent hops here. And the beer, as I said, it passes the sieve here, and we also continuously remove the separated beer to the tank or directly to a centrifuge or whatever. There are different possibilities, which I will show you later. So here are some pictures. It shows the inside of the sieve to show you what happens. On the left side, you see the upper part of the HopSteiner, and the beer flows over the edge on top. And you can already see that most of the beer disappeared already in the first third of the sieve, and you can watch the particles slowly gliding down on the sieve. On the right side, you can see that there's still particles gliding down, and you can also see that they're not as wet as they were before. So you were really losing beer. The hop trub loses beer, and we get more beer into the tank again. We also have prepared a video. So that's again the top. The beer flows over the sieve. That's the top part, which you can see here. And the hop particles are slowly gliding down on the sieve. And it's a positive thing. They also remain a certain time on the sieve and get a little bit drier. So, and this helps to get the beer out of this hop trub. It's very important, I forgot to mention, that the HopSteiner has to be in an absolutely vertical, in a horizontal position, because that's important for an even overflow of the beer plus hops. Yeah, and if there is a hop load used for dry hopping, you can see there's also a large quantity of hops coming to the bottom of the sieve and slowly falling in this separate chamber where we collect these hop solids. So even with very high quantities, and this picture we took for in a trial where we used 6.5 kilograms per hectoliter. This is an extreme thing, and that's something I will discuss also later on. But you can see that even with such a high hop load, you can easily work with the HopSteiner. So we also wanted to see what happens during sieving. We know that we still have some particles which can pass the sieve. I told you that the size of these slits is 250 micron. But we know, due to the Quanda effect, that only particles which are much smaller than 250 micron can pass the sieve. Therefore, we did an analysis at the Technical University in Munich, which shows us the distribution of the particle size in the beer right after dry hopping, or let's say before we enter the HopSteiner. And you can see that from 0 up to almost 600 micron. You need just to look at the black line at the bottom here. And now you can watch when I show you the next slide, how this line looks like when I show you the beer after the HopSteiner. So now it's a complete change. And there, as you can see, there are almost no particles at 250 micron. And the maximum for the particle size is at around 40 to 50 micron. So you see this excellent effect for removing particles which are even smaller than the size of the slits in the sieve is. Yeah, there are different options how to use the HopSteiner. And there is one option if there's a smaller brewery which has no centrifuge, you can use the HopSteiner in connection with the separation tank. And how this works, I will show you. You do the regular dry hopping, maybe you put the hops directly in the storage tank, or you do a pre-dissolving of the hops in this separate tank, and then you recirculate it in the beer tank for several hours or whatever. This is depending on the philosophy of the brewers, how much of the aroma substances and also other components in the hops they want to dissolve in the beer. So after that, maybe after several hours or only after 1 week, it depends on the brewery, then you can pump your beer to the beer cleaner. So this valve at the bottom opens and you go to the beer cleaner now, to the HopSteiner, where you separate the hop trub and go into the sedimentation tank. As I told you, we have still very small particles remaining in the sieved beer, in the separated beer, but that's not a big issue. The most important thing is that you remove these very large particles. So in the sedimentation tank, you have to wait a certain time till the separation takes place. We close the valve at the bottom again. We wait for about 12 hours till the hop trap settles in the tank, and then we can discharge the hop trap from the tank. If this is done, the next valve opens and the beer can be pumped into the bright beer tank and then going directly to the bottling line. That's one option, and as you see, you can use the HopSteiner right after dry hopping or later just prior to filling. So there are very different options to use it. Let's come to some pictures. And here you can see on the left side the beer directly after the HopSteiner. Of course, there's still a lot of yeast in the beer, but also these very small particles. But when you look at the right side in this tube, you can see that already after 1 hour and 20 minutes, most of the solids already settled here. So that was also a big surprise for us, that there is such a fast separation of this fine material. But I think it absorbs a lot of beer already, so it has a very high gravity and separates easily from the beer. So in practice, it looks like that. This was the the residue in the corners of the tank, which we removed at the bottom, and you see these very fine particles with beer, which is a very limited quantity and can easily be removed. And finally, you get the beer in the glass, and when you look at the foam, there are no more hop particles in the foam. So you get a very good, a very effective separation by the HopSteiner by removing these large particles, and all the particles below 100, 150 micron, they are easily removed from the tank because there's a clear separation between this phase and the beer phase above. Good, let's look at another option. In this case, we can also use it in combination with a centrifuge. So if you use the HopSteiner before you go to the centrifuge, you can remove all these large particles from the beer, which helps the centrifuge to work much smoother. So the only a small concentration of hop particles when you go to the centrifuge, and you won't have this decrease in performance of the centrifuge. Of course, you can also automate the whole system. I'm especially thinking of larger breweries who have very large tanks, and you can imagine that in this case you find more hops at the lower part of the tank, and in this case you can just use a turbidity meter. So that means when there is a lower turbidity measured, you can directly switch to the centrifuge. And maybe later, because we often see that a lot of hops are still remaining on top of the tank, then the turbidity meter will show you, oh, there's a higher turbidity again, and you automatically you open the valve going over the HopSteiner again and then to the centrifuge. So this could be a useful device working automatically with in combination with the centrifuge. So, and this looks like that. Again, a similar picture. Let's say the sedimentation tank here is replaced by a centrifuge. That's all. So you do the dry hopping as usual. You first go, as long as your turbidity meter shows a high turbidity of the beer, you go via the HopSteiner. And then if there is less turbidity, you can go directly into the centrifuge. So this has no negative input of the centrifuge because we saw that in large tanks that beer is almost coming very clear. Just at the end of the process, it can happen that hops are again coming, and then we use again the HopSteiner to remove this hop trub. So this is a second option, and of course you can do that. You can use the HopSteiner also directly after dry hopping or later prior to filling. So that's again a decision which is up to you. Yeah, and the third setup is together with the HopGun Pro from BrauKon, and I think this is also a good idea to produce a kind of aroma extract. That means in the HopGun Pro, you blend a high load of hops with the beer. In this case, it was these 6.5 kilograms per hectoliter, where I showed another picture before. And you extract that for 1 hour, 1.5 hours, and you get a suspension, a highly concentrated suspension. And this concentrate, this suspension, you can pump over the HopSteiner to get the particles away. So finally, in your tank, you don't have any large hop particles anymore. So it's just a fine material, but this is no problem for further working with a centrifuge. So this is something where you can avoid a lot of problems with residues of hops in your beer tank. And of course, it guarantees an error-free operation of the centrifuge. So that's an example for this setup here. So on the left side, you have the HopGun Pro, where you produce these very intense aroma suspension here. You mix it, you get a good extraction effect, and then you pump it into this chamber in the HopSteiner. You sieve the beer, you get a beer free from large hop particles, and finally you can pump it into your tank where you still have your regular storage time, whatever is necessary, and later on you can centrifuge it. And there are also different possibilities, of course. You can also recirculate the content of the tank to get this fine material together with the yeast in solution and go directly to the centrifuge, which is for sure an easy process. Or you separate this hop trub with beer with the fine hop particles and remove it first, you discharge it, and then go to the centrifuge. But the quantity which is still here in the conos is rather small because it's just a fraction with a very small hop particles. So this is an option which helps to clean the tanks, and these are two pictures how the tank looks like after emptying the tank. There are still a lot of hop particles left in the tank, and this can be avoided when you use the HopGun Pro in combination with our HopSteiner. So that could be very useful and can save also a lot of time, and also you have less waste in your sip station. In this case, we only used 200 grams of hops per hectoliter for dry hopping, but in other cases we go up to 1 kilogram. It's even worse, and this can really cause big trouble in your sip station. Yeah, now I would like to come to a trial which we recently did at the Jopen Brewery in Haarlem in the Netherlands. And I'm very happy that the guys, Chris and Jaap, helped us a lot to do these tests. And they did a very good job also getting the figures for us, how the losses are, and therefore I can present you some of the results here. But first, thanks to Chris and Jaap for helping us. Yeah, in this case, we use the beer. It's a triple IPA. It's called the Heavy Cross. It has 10% of alcohol, very strong beer. And the dry hopping was 800 grams per hectoliter. That's a nice quantity and not so easy to remove from the beer, of course. They added the hops to the storage tank. They did the recirculation for 24 hours with the hops. Then after the recirculation, they passed the beer over the HopSteiner to a clean, empty tank. And there they let the fine particles settle. And after 72 hours, they removed mainly all small hop particles. And after 5 days, they did a second removal, but in this case, it was mainly yeast, which they found when they discharged the tank. So what was the influence on the beer losses itself. So the beer losses in this brewery are calculated from the cold wort to the bright beer. And fortunately, they had a lot of notes how it worked in 2019. And the average figure for 2019 was a loss of 29.4% of beer for this triple IPA. In the test with the HopSteiner, the loss was 18.8%. So this was a big difference. So they got a lot of beer back. And in principle, the saving was around 40%. So this is a very useful information, and this is the first time that we got these figures. As I said, it's not so easy in breweries to check exactly these quantities, but we're very happy that Jopen helped us a lot here. Yeah, I think there are a lot of advantages of the BrauKon HopSteiner. Of course, first of all, as we could see, we can reduce the beer losses. And we could reduce the beer losses with the HopSteiner, which is easily handled because it's a machine which has no or apparatus with no moving parts. You have no problem with maintenance or such things. This device is even self-cleaning. It means that the beer which is passing the sieve is at the same time cleaning the sieve, keeps it clear. So it's very easy to handle when I compare this with a centrifuge. And as I already mentioned, you have no maintenance at all. It's just the cleaning, but the sip process is also part of the HopSteiner. We have a lot of these spray heads inside, so you can easily clean it with your sip plant. Of course, as you saw, there are various options to use it, and it's a mobile unit on these rolls. You can easily take it from one part in the brewery or from one section in the brewery to another section. That's not a big issue. It's also a shorter process for removing hop trub. And in another brewery in Norway, that's the Amundsen Brewery, where we did also a lot of tests, and also thanks to Matt in the brewery, he also did a lot with our HopSteiner, and he even called the process of removing the hops, he called it HopSteinering, and it worked also very well. And they recognized that for heavily dry hopped beers, they have to discharge the hops for 4 or 5 days. With the HopSteiner, they could do it with 1 day. That means you have suddenly a higher tank capacity because you get faster an empty tank again. So this might even reduce any investments in tanks and can enlarge your capacity without buying new tanks. That's also an option, of course. And what I liked a lot is also the combination with the HopGun Pro. You don't get these lots of hops into your beer tank. You prepare this aroma concentrate and you avoid the lot of hop particles in the tank. I think these are some interesting advantages, and I'm very optimistic that brewers will love this device. Yeah, I want to thank you for listening. Thank you very much for your attention. And I think Sandro collected some questions for me now, and I hope you can answer your questions. Thank you.
Hello, Willi. Yeah, thank you. Very interesting to see how the whole process since many years ago, we started with a prototype here in Mainburg, and now it became a really nice device with hygienic design and everything, and working wonderful in the brewery that are testing it. yeah, in fact, we had a couple of questions. I hardly can count it, maybe around 40.
Oh, yeah.
Let's start with the first one. The question is, my name is Ferrando T, and I'm craft brewer for many years with dry hopping experience. I guess I have used at least 40 different hop varieties in the meantime. Do you think that they behave different when using this new device?
Of course, generally different varieties behave differently during dry hopping. That's clear. Some in solution, some go up to the top. It's so different. But in this device, we have already a lot of experience with different varieties. And for the HopSteiner, it makes no difference which variety you use. We have experience with US varieties, with European varieties. But as long as you use a pellet from these varieties, the separation works very well, and I'm sure even hop cones we could separate. Of course, then you have to change the installation a little bit. But as I said, as long as you use pellets from different hop varieties, I never experienced a problem with that.
Okay. Thank you for your comment on this. And then we have a large producer of dry hop beers who mentioned, since we're using about 40 tanks in our brewery, the mobility and the flexibility of the HopSteiner is very interesting to us. Mm-hmm. How long does it take to set up the beer cleaner when moving from one tank to another? Is it less than 40 minutes?
Yeah, I would say it depends, because when we start with a beer cleaner, with a HopSteiner, we have to fill it with water to remove the oxygen, and then we remove the water by CO2. So we have an absolutely just CO2 atmosphere, and this takes, of course, a while. Yeah, I think 40 minutes will be a little bit too short. Mm-hmm. Let's say 1 hour, a little bit more than 1 hour. If I understood the question right, yeah.
Yeah. Willi, I just get a notice from the IT. Looks like we have a technical issue to solve. So hold on for a second, please. Ingo is on its way. I just have to change. Please, everybody, please just give us 1 second, and we will for sure. We can solve this immediately.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like something's going wrong today, because we have too many times talking about 40, and it looks like the constellation of the stars and the intergalactic conditions, they just seem to that we break a all-time record, because we have somebody who's being in the technical department of HopSteiner for 40 years now, and we really need to verify this now. You see him on the screen, but I have to consult with our experts in Freising, so maybe we can set up a line to Freising to see if this is true or not. Frank, do you hear me? Frank, we have crazy news about 40 today. Do you know something about it?
Yeah. Good morning, hopheads all around the world on your computer. This is Freising Television with a live broadcast from the real world capital of beer. Today we have a special day, and today we celebrate the hop hero from the Hallertau, Willi. For exactly 40 years now, he has been breathing the hop aroma and calculating bitter substance yields at the HopSteiner company. He is a real hop scientist, and we can call him Master of Lupulin.
Thank you.
Willi, we wish you all the best for the next 40 years, and always a good beer in your fridge.
Frank, hold on. I just get another information. Looks like he's not only a hop expert, he's also a very good sportsman. Can you comment on that?
Oh yeah, we just received this information, brand new. Talking about sports. So what we just got in is that Lance Armstrong completely exhausted. For the 40th time in a row, Mr. Steroids could not win the bicycle race, the famous bicycle race, Tour de Blanc in the Hallertau. And the winner was once again Mr. Willi. You can see him bottom right there in his yellow tricot.
Yeah, they are crazy guys.
but listen, Willi, but even Willi was not quite clean. He was tested beer positive, and he was, what doctors said and confirmed, he was totally overhopped. Willi, all the best for you, and cheers from my side, from Freising.
Thanks a lot, Frank. It was a big surprise. Thank you. Yeah, but it's really exactly that day, 2nd of July, I started with HopSteiner.
we know.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. It was a big surprise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Willi, we have to continue shortly, because I just get another information that some. Just interrupted a very important meeting to say something about this today as well. So welcome, Joachim. Do you hear us? We don't hear you. Just a second. Joachim?
Hello,
now you're online.
Now I'm online. Okay, that's great. So thanks, guys. But let's be serious again. Today we celebrate Willi Mitte's 40th anniversary in HopSteiner. In the name of the management of the company and our shareholders, the Gimbel family, I would like to take that opportunity of being in that today's seminar with you guys, and thank you, Willi, for all the great work you did for the company. You always provide great ideas and solutions, new products, processes, and procedures, as we could also see today. As HopSteiner's technical director, you made the success of our company possible. And not to forget, you have always been a great colleague, person, and friend. So thank you, Willi. We now let you go back to work. I guess you still have a few real questions and answers from you.
No, thanks a lot, Joachim. That's very kind. Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Enjoy
that. Bye. Okay. So then, Willi, I guess we have to go back shortly for the last questions, for the real questions. Maybe you noticed the first ones were not really true. They were all dealing with 40.
You are right. Now I recognize that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess yeah. Let's pick up the first ones. We go back to the dry hopping device. One question was about the input of oxygen during the process. Do you have any numbers of the oxygen input?
Yeah, sure. So as I already mentioned, we do this filling with water and then removing the water with CO2. So we have very good conditions to work without oxygen. And what we also saw at the trials in different breweries and the latest at the Jopen, I think we had only 5 ppb or even less. 5 ppb was right at the beginning, and a little bit later it went even lower than 5 ppbs of oxygen. So I think it's a very good number, and I don't expect any oxygen increase coming from the HopSteiner because we really fill it with CO2 completely. So it's a pure CO2 atmosphere.
Okay. On the other hand, there was also the question coming up, what about the carbonation of the beer and how is it controlled? Mm-hmm. So could you make a comment on this?
Yeah. Of course, we always get the same pressure in the HopSteiner which we have in the tank. So there is no loss of CO2 because we are working with the same pressure. That's a very important issue, and I think it was not a problem. Just in one case, I can recall that there was too much CO2 in the beer finally, but of course this could be adjusted by the pressure in the HopSteiner again.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then also the question came up about the size of the equipment and the capacity. So let's say, for example, for a transfer of 100 to 200 hectoliter per hour, and also with regard to the hop load. Do you have more information on this?
Yeah. So of course, the throughput in the HopSteiner is strongly depending on the hop quantity which you use for dry hopping. So, but we had already numbers when we were at around 1 kilogram per hectoliter, and we ran the HopSteiner. Of course, at the beginning, when more hops were coming, we were at 30 to 40 hectoliters per hour, but then went up to 100, 120 hectoliters per hour. And of course, this is also something depending on the pipes. We enlarged the pipes going to the HopSteiner and going back from the HopSteiner to the tank. So I think 120, 130 hectoliters should be easily possible, but always depending on the hop load in the beer, of course. And that's why I also showed the possibility, especially these throughputs are important for larger brewers, so they can really control that via turbidity meter. So maybe in the beginning you have more hops, you pass the HopSteiner, and afterwards you can pump the beer directly to your centrifuge or to another tank, because there are only few hop particles in the beer, and it can happen at the end of the process on top of the beer. Some varieties really stay there in a reasonable quantity, and then this can automatically be passed over the HopSteiner again. So this is a good possibility to achieve a large, high throughput for the HopSteiner and for the whole process in the brewery, of course.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then another question was about the cleaning and process part. So do you see that there's a, yeah, could you describe the ZIP process a little bit more in detail?
Okay, we installed a lot of these spray heads. They are in front, behind of the screen of the sieve, and we really get these sipping in every little corner of the HopSteiner. And of course, you can first, it's the best to rinse it with water, and then to remove all these hop particles, and then you can connect it to the zip system in the brewery easily. So you have the same, you can use the same zip process as you use it for the tanks and pipes and whatever.
Okay, thank you. I just have to look on the questions.
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Hold on a second. What do you think about reusing the hops that come out from the HopSteiner? Is there any chance to get out some more aroma, or is the extraction already on such an efficient way that you hardly can use the spent material after the dry hopping process anymore? So what do you think on this?
Yeah, the efficiency of the extraction is very bad, of course, to be honest. It's of course, for bitter substances, the yield finally in beer is maybe between 5 and 10%, and of course we lose also some in these, yeah, in the hop trub, also with the fine material at the end of the process in the brewery. But to use the hop trub is a difficult thing, because you get hops which are rather wet. The dry matter can be between 10, maybe 12%. And so that means you have 85 to 90% of water in this material. So it means if you really want to use it again, you have to use it immediately. Otherwise, you have to freeze it or whatever, because in such a wet milieu, it's very important to use it immediately again. Other it will become waste. But of course, there are alpha acids left, to be honest, and this can be discussed, but we have no experience yet by reusing this material. And of course, you have to find a way to bring it into the brew house again. I wouldn't recommend to use it for dry hopping again, because the very precious aroma substances are removed, because we have a much better yield for linalool, for example. We have a bad yield for myrcene and other terpenes. So I don't recommend to use it for dry hopping again. But of course, if you want to take advantage of the residual alpha, you can try that in the brew house again. But as I said, we have no experience yet. We are still working on the dry hopping process itself to make it more efficient. But this could be a next step in our research, of course. Yeah.
Okay, understand. So even if using the spent material in the brew house again, of course it must be handled also in a logistical way, because you cannot store this this wet material for a rather long time, probably.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Okay. Some more questions came up about the flow rate. So we discussed it already, but there's a few numbers are given here. For example, like 50 hectoliters per hour, or also the maximum. Maybe you can just comment on the flow rate again. What the possibilities of the HopSteiner that in the size that we have it right now.
Yeah. So of course you can run the HopSteiner from 0 to 120, because that's our experience, which we have already. But as already mentioned, it depends on the hop load which you use for dry hopping. And if you have 2 or 3 kilograms, of course we start only with 20-30 hectoliters per hour. But in average, I think part of the question was how it runs with 50 hectoliters per hour. I think that's not an issue. We can always achieve that in average, because in the beginning, depending on how the distribution is of the particles in the tank, but in the beginning it will be a little bit slower, and then we can increase the speed maybe till the end, where hops coming again, and we lower it. But most of the hops, when we use 1 kilogram, so most of the beer can be run with 80-90 hectoliters per hour. That's not an issue at all.
Okay.
But we are rather flexible with this unit. Of course, if it comes to higher throughputs, of course, we can enlarge the device, of course. But I don't know whether it's really necessary, because if you work with a buffer tank, you can first collect the HopSteiner beer in a buffer tank, and then where we have the low throughput, and then when we speed up, you can then use your centrifuge afterwards or whatever, and in average we will always reach a speed of 80-90 hectoliters per hour. So this shouldn't be an issue. But I think it's necessary to have a buffer tank, because if you directly connect with a centrifuge, which has a higher performance than the HopSteiner in the first phase, then it's good to have a buffer tank to collect this first, and then when less hop particles are coming to the HopSteiner, we can accelerate the speed here, and we can easily feed the centrifuge with a beer.
Okay. So it also strongly depends which options you take that you've shown before, and which material has to be removed from the.
Always a lot of parameters, of course. Yeah, it also depends. What I forgot, if there is still a lot of yeast, of course, the process will also be a little bit slower, of course. Yeah, this is also possible. I forgot to mention the yeast. Yeah, it has also an influence.
Okay, then one question came up about the different sizes of the device. So right now, as far as I know, we have one standard size. Are there plans to adjust it to bigger or smaller amounts? Do you know something about this?
Yeah, of course, we had already a plan for a larger device, which I think is perhaps not really necessary due to the facts I told you before. Working with a buffer tank, you have a wide range of possibilities then, because you can, in a large brewery, you can use this automation by using a turbidity meter, and then you can switch directly to a centrifuge. So I think we have a lot of options. I don't know whether a larger unit is really necessary. I can understand that for small breweries, this HopSteiner type is a very large thing. Of course, you can run it with a very low quantity. And I know from microbrewers, they expect, of course, a lower price, but the price for the material is not the most important thing. I think that the price for a smaller device, okay, there are lower costs involved, but it's not directly in relation to the size of the device. You know, that's the problem. You can easily work with that in a small brewery, but of course it's a big thing. We could, in the future, when we have enough experience with this current HopSteiner, then we could have plans to make it smaller. But price-wise, there will be not such a price decrease that you expect in terms of different throughputs.
Okay. Well, as we're coming close to the hour that we have planned to do the seminar, and I hope we picked up all the questions. If not, we will do this by email later. I would also say from my side that it was a very funny seminar today. Willi, I hope you enjoyed your 40th, your anniversary of being 40 years with HopSteiner today. Yeah, I guess we will have a glass of beer later, or champagne, or we don't know. Still a couple of options to celebrate, and also from my side, my best congratulations, and it's always fun and very nice to work with you.
Thank you, Sandro. I think the beer we drink a little bit later, because in the afternoon I'm the truck beer driver for my son-in-law. So I still wait a little bit with the beer.
Okay, but, we will pick it up.
Thanks again to everybody. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Willi. Thanks for everybody. Yes, and I would like to just give a very short note. On our website, on the section technical publications, you find some more information about the topic of today. You will also get a link soon, an email soon, with including a link of the record of today's session. And our next webinar will be held by Martin Biendl next Thursday at the same time, so the 9th of July. And he will talk about the analysis of dry hop beers. So I hope you enjoyed the time with us today. We're looking forward to meeting you soon, and stay healthy. Goodbye.